So a lot of SEOs keep, I've been saying over 2025, it's all about brand, right? It's all about getting your brand built up. And I think that's true, but I think that out of context, people don't see why. And I think that the important thing about getting your brand built up is.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Jolly SEO's TLDR. I'm your host, Greg Heilers, co-founder of Jolly SEO, where we specialized in earned link building and nowadays Reddit to help with not just SEO, but AEO, AIO, GEO, whatever your favorite acronym is. Today's guest, Dixon Jones, is the founder of Waikay, and you are going to help us understand how we got from when you started over 25 years ago in search to where we are today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we might be here a long time, but I'll go wherever you take me, Greg. How are you?
Well, let's start at the origin. You started one of the first search agencies in the UK. Is that right?
Yeah, so I set up a company called Receptional back in 1999. That's still going. I'm not part of it anymore. There was a management buyout in 2007, something like that, which is still a long time ago. But yeah, I built that up when. So the first time I did any SEO, I actually before all of that, I used to write and run murder mystery evenings for a living, and I built a website in 1997, something like that, and using Front Page 97, in fact. And I went to Yahoo, biggest one at the time, typed in murder mystery games, and there was this big banner ad at the top for Adidas, and I thought, that's insane. So I typed in murder mystery games and Adidas was advertising at the top, and I thought, that is completely insane. This whole machine is being financed by Adidas putting an advert at the top, and all the money is in that top result. So that's where I decided that that this was a viable business to start getting involved in, and yeah, been involved ever since, really.
That's awesome. And for the listener, we're not just going to focus on the past, but there's a lot of relevance because in today's world of AI search, a lot of us are finding that what's old is new again. And
yeah,
so yeah. Do you mind just digging back to 2000, 2005, over the course of the decades? Like, what are you seeing here in 2026 that you're thinking, I remember this?
Well, it's a little bit like so back in those days, it really was like the Wild West. There was a real feeling that we were all experimenting in a new world of data, and and it kind of feels exactly the same now. So back then, we were sitting making up rules as we came along, learning how to what was ethical, what was legal, what was appropriate, what was what worked, and I think that it's the same thing that's happening now. So the search industry kind of had all those different things like Yahoo and Inktomi and AltaVista and stuff, and then they kind of eventually became all in outside China, so it all became Google or Baidu, around depending on where you are in the world, and so it kind of got homogenous for a few years, but LLMs, it's all out there again now. You've got Qwen, you've got DeepSeek, you've got ChatGPT, you've got Copilot, you've got Gemini. So now we're back to a new world with new rules. So what I really like about it now is that it's not just about getting to the number one. It's about getting your brand cited when a user asks a question of a GPT that your brand would fit into the answer with. And I think that oftentimes the user doesn't even know what GPT they're using. The world has moved so far on. I see people talking about new metrics, or how do we get traffic from GPTs and stuff, and I go to one of these, a good question there. Then maybe let's say you've got a company in China who's got a problem with a rental property in London. Let's say that that could happen. They're a property company in China and they've got a rental property in London, and the landlord and the tenant has bailed on their rent or whatever, and they've suddenly got to talk to a lawyer in the UK. So they'll send over to their estate agent in the UK and say, "Hey, we got a problem with this tenant. We need to go and find some lawyers on them. Can you give me some lawyers that can deal with rent retrieval or whatever it may be?" And then the estate agent is going to say, "Well, I don't know the answer to that question." They're going to just go and say to their GPT, "Please draft a reply to these people with some ideas." And it's going to write it. They're not going to necessarily know who they've done. It's going to go back and it's going to list 3 or 4 local lawyers, send that information back. Back in China, they're going to say, right, okay, now we've got some people to go and approach. That's great. They've been recommended by this estate agent. They haven't been they've been recommended by some machine, and that's fine. We'll contact them. At what point do you track the visitor in that process? At what point do you say, what was the prompt? The prompt is irrelevant, because the prompt is write a draft reply. That was the prompt that was to the GPT. It's going to the tools that are out there in this brave new world at the moment, most of them are just tracking prompts. Saying, well, are we going to get better for best hotel in Chengdu? And I think that there's the problem, is that that's not what people are doing. People are using it as an AI assistant, and if you think about that as an AI assistant, you don't know what that AI assistant is going to do. They're going to go and do some investigating of websites, do some investigating of data that they already have, and come back with a response. But to try and consistently be there for a prompt that nobody is actually going to physically type in is a question. And secondly, expecting the main metric to be traffic is also a mistake in that process as well, because the first process will be somebody coming along already committed to the product, already understanding the brand, and already ready to buy, I hope.
Hey, hope you're enjoying the show. We're going to get right back to it. Real quick, if you're not sure how you're showing up in AI tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and the like, click on that first link in the description. If you fill that out for us, we'll send you your own AI visibility report and see how we can help you boost your results. All right, without further ado, remember that link and enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, I have now met with a couple of tool owners. In 2025, we saw dozens enter the space.
Yep.
I'm sure you saw all the VC money. We got a new industry. Yep. We can dominate. Yep. You were with Majestic, and you mentioned you're still on great terms with Majestic. I'm
still an ambassador. Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know Majestic, it's a backlink analysis search engine, specialist search engine. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was in David Bain's book with Majestic, the SEO 2026, and so I'm also a fan. The SEO industry. Oh, you've got it.
Well, I haven't got the 2026. I've got the 2022, 23, 24. I wasn't even 25. They decided that they should ban me, but I'm back in the 26. But I can't. It's over there somewhere. Yeah. But you can see a bunch behind me. Yeah.
Just a temporary ban. But we saw consolidation in the SEO industry, but now it's like you said, brave new world, wild wild west in GEO or AEO or AIO, as we're still settling on an acronym here. I agree with what your critique is here, that I'm not even sure we're monitoring the right things. And then there's a whole problem with attribution. Do you have a path forward defined? Obviously, building Waikay, you have a strong hunch, but are you still user feedback mode?
Absolutely, and it goes back to the to the 60s really, because the idea of Mad Men, where you've got this brand advertising on these New York advertisers kind of creating TV ads and things, and then how do you track how valuable that is? But I think it's very much the same kind of world out there. So most of the tools have gone, right, let's just get all these prompts, track these prompts, and see if your brand's being there. They're doing that, day in day. And Waikay does that as well.
I'm interrupting, but us included, we built a dashboard in Looker for our clients. And it's just prompt based, and that's the best effort we did in-house. And I've even since learned we may have goofed there, because the responses you get through API calls versus native prompts in the web app are different. And so we have a reconciliation effort we need to make now for our clients. But I interrupted nonetheless. I just wanted to self-incriminate.
No. You're actually right. I mean, we can go on to the API calls versus the scraping options as well. But the chat and Waikay does that as well. It does it both with API calls and with scraping actually. But we didn't build it to start with that. We kind of that wasn't our minimum viable product. It was a long way from our minimum viable product. Our logic was that LLMs make mistakes. LLMs make decisions. And the user is interacting in such a different way that job number one is to make sure that the AI knows you properly. So Waikay stands for what AI knows about you. After that, you can spell it, thankfully, because you can't pronounce it. But it's what AI knows about you, and so. If you're building a house, you don't start with the windows. You start with the foundations, and the foundations are making sure that the AI understands you and understands you correctly, portrays you correctly. So better than working out, sentiment, or better than working out, prominence. The best thing is to say, does it understand you correctly? So the best way to do that is the way that we do this is to say, right, let's build a knowledge graph of your website. That's your point of truth. That's your definition of truth. Obviously, your website is a lot of words, so we turn it into a knowledge graph. And the knowledge graph is just basically, specific topics and ideas, all scattered on a big graph, so we can sit there and say this idea is very closely related to this idea in this website. And then we say, right, ChatGPT, what do you know about this brand? And let the AI come back with all of the information it's got. But what we do then is we build a knowledge graph of that response, and we map it to the knowledge graph of the website. So we can start to see gaps, and we can measure that gap. So we got a patent pending in the US to do this, basically, of saying, this yes, it says lots of things about your brand, or it says nothing about your brand, but regardless of that, is it saying the same things as what you're saying about your brand? That's where the magic starts to happen. So then we can create a score out of 100 for how accurately the website is portraying your brand. And we can also do that by topic. So then we can say, let's say you're a hotel company. So we can say, right, let's start talking about hotels. Or we got one client that does customer service, we can then say, right, what do you know about Mandarin in the context of hotels? Because Mandarin in the context of hotels is very different to Mandarin in the context of oranges, right? So finding out about hotels and making sure that the LLM understands that Mandarin is a luxury brand. It caters to a sort of Eastern market. It doesn't really. It's a fantastic market to people that want to discover the wonders of the Orient, and then we can start to see those things, and then we can also reduce that to a fact-checking process and say, right, these are the facts in that response, and then you can easily go through and see if it's right or wrong. So that's a very different starting point. Because now we've got scores out of 100, which you can try and improve over time. Because if your brand is not being represented right in the context of hotels, maybe it is being represented correctly in the context of luxury travel. So you can start to build up these business areas and improve the LLM's understanding in business areas, rather than going the other way and saying, for me, the prompt tracking is like the analytics at the end of the event. You've already, all the work's done. The magic is, how do you get from, the LLM not understanding you to the LLM understanding you correctly? And then the gap that where you fill the gap then is we say, right, okay, let's say luxury travel is our topic. We can sit there and build a knowledge graph of the website, knowledge graph of a couple of competitors, and then we can say, what do you know about the Mandarin in the context of luxury travel? And it comes out with this topic graph, but we can see the gaps that the competitors are filling in the LLM responses, and Mandarin isn't. So then we can provide this action plan for Mandarin saying, right, these are the things. These are very, very specific things that you need to do to change your perception in the LLMs. Let's write this content about, about locations, or this content about, about room rates, or this, whatever it may be. And also change this and, knock a few things around. So it's a different approach. Going from the ground up, it's much more focused on getting people from the indexing phase to the prominence phase, if you like. So the prominence phase is not necessarily about the click. It's about the brand being properly represented in a response.
Yeah, well, just when I thought I'd understood, I thought, okay, so we're doing away with competitor analysis, but then you brought in competitors. So we're kind of hybridizing.
Yes, we bring in. Well, we had to start somewhere, right? So when we start up a project, we ask you to name just two competitors. You could start up lots of projects for the same brand, one around luxury travel, one around hotels, one around China, whatever it may be. But we kindly do that to give a kind of fingerprint of what topics other people are talking about in your industry sector. So yeah, the projects have two competitors, but when the prompt tracking, we also start recording brands as well, but we automate that. So we do prompt tracking. It's still quite a big thing because all the competitors went that way, and just because they're wrong doesn't mean I can't do it, and so. If you then just go and say, right, what's the best luxury hotel brand? That might be a prompt. So then we just go and ask all the LLMs for whatever responses they're coming back with. We extract all of the entities, all the brands out of those, and then start to map over all the different LLMs that we're tracking, how many times each brand is mentioned, and then just sort of give it we call it a share of model, so that every time that the Mandarin is mentioned, it's 1 point. Every time Hilton is mentioned, it's 1 point across all the models. And then we can create this, basically this league table, really, which seems to work. And that's actually pretty cool in that the way we use that, we use that so that we can compete with Profound and Peak and the other providers. But we also use that to start identifying the other topics that those brands are being known for as well. So the LLMs then pull out, Hilton is really good because it's got a great loyalty program or something like that, and so the loyalty program becomes something that consistently appears in the LLM responses. So then we can start saying, okay, Mandarin, why don't we set up a action plan on improving our loyalty program prominence in the LLMs? So it does go full circle.
So we could go a couple different ways here, but I want to first, I know a lot of the action items are based on the findings, right? So they're going to be brand specific, but at this point with all the data you've been collecting and algorithms change over time, we're all slowly coming to accept that, OpenAI, its algorithm isn't going to be static, right? It's just going to be like Google has been for decades, changing. But
yeah,
we're at the start of the new year here. Is there one trend or two that you could call out for us that might apply in general to a listener that they can action on?
Yeah. So a lot of SEOs have been saying over 2025 it's all about brand, right? It's all about getting your brand built up. And I think that's true, but I think that out of context, people don't see why. And I think that the important thing about getting your brand built up is not trying to make your brand just more memorable. It's about getting your brand associated with the topics that are important to your business and only the topics that are important to business. We found we did an experiment. Well, we didn't do an experiment. We found an error in our own fact checking of our own brand, or our sister brand, Inlinks, and it said that Inlinks was a rank checking company, for example. So, and Inlinks doesn't do rank checking. We leave that to Ahrefs and SEMrush and SC ranking and people, and so that was a fake fact. So rather than embracing that, what we did was on our about page we said we are not a rank checking company. We changed it around, and we started to tell the LLMs and the search engines what we don't do, as well as what we do. So it's not just about getting more. It's about refining your brand and making it only associated with the things that you should be associated with. Because every time you leak your brand into something that you don't actually do, I think I kind of see it as you're taking away a little bit of love for the things you do. And of course, the things you don't do, the customer's going to see it. You're going to be in the mix for a piece of business that you can't actually get. You're going to waste resources trying to get that business, even though you don't do quite what they want. Instead of making sure that the only inquiries that are coming in are the ones that you're bang on for.
Okay,
that make sense?
That does totally. We also there's a different track I want to ask you about, because you brought up Asia and China, and I appreciate that, because I'm here in China and you lived in Hong Kong, and so we have that in common for the listener to understand why we were talking about that. So my head goes to not quite localization, but to some extent. We've got a lot of international SEOs or SEOs representing international brands.
Yep.
What is a brand? I mean, we can use China, for example, where just publishing content in English is a challenge enough. But then optimizing it for LLMs, where do they even begin here?
Well, so Waikay has gone two ways, but essentially, an LLM doesn't have to learn in English, right? In fact, an LLM doesn't always learn in English. I have seen on more than one occasion an LLM learning in Chinese, and then effectively putting Chinese characters in a response. Okay, I go off some pretty weird sort of places for that, but the LLM can learn in one language and regurgitate in another, and so you can be. This is a great opportunity for people that have got great content in Italian and or in Hebrew and Latin, whatever it may be, and because now that content can get surfaced in LLMs. So, but what we're doing in Waikay is we're able to work in. I think we're working in 40 languages now, and so we can read the content in that language. We can understand it because we effectively tokenize it. We turn it into entities. So an entity is the same whether the Eiffel Tower is the same whether you record it. The Eiffel Tower, the Tour Eiffel, or that big metal thing in Paris, right? It's the same thing. It doesn't really matter how you describe it, as long as it makes sense to the person at the other end that has understood it. So whether that's a machine at the other end or whether it's human. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for smaller businesses and for local businesses and for non-English speaking businesses than people realize here. Yes, of course, you might want to have your language, your website in 2, 3 or more languages. What I would say is that if you have a different message in different languages, that's where you start to confuse the machines, because if you're trying to tell them that you're a luxury hotel brand in Chinese, and you're trying to tell them that you're a great destination in English, then you've confused the LLMs, because they're just translating everything back to concepts. Really, well, they're not. They're taking it back to tokens, which is language specific, but the underlying message goes into entities, and I like this. I like this idea of climbing is closely associated to hiking, is closely associated to hills, but it's a long way from spaghetti, right? And so the more you talk around the right kind of ideas, regardless of the languages, the better your approach. I might have gone a bit off track there, but in short, I think that you can do a lot with any language website now that you couldn't necessarily do, because I could ask for solicitors in Indonesia that work in the rental market to any LLM. It will have the ability to read sites and understand concepts that are originally produced in different languages and bring it back to me. And we didn't have that in search engines. In traditional search engines, traditionally they were working in the language that they were originally built in.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that we actually did bring it back to localization. My first internet gig was helping companies in China who they had done the initial pass of translation, but then as the editor trying to localize it so that it wasn't, shall we say, culturally misaligned with their audience. So
yes, yeah.
it'll be something they need to reconcile, though, because they are not able to alter the Mandarin text on their sites to that extent. So they'll have to figure that out.
Yeah.
That
is a challenge, and it's going to be very unique to each person and to each page, isn't it? Really, I have found that LLMs are better at translating than traditional translation systems. I think everyone's probably moved over to LLM translation systems.
Oh, I just had my full body check translated in 2 minutes. I mean, I asked my wife, and it was a week and a half later, but ChatGPT just took care of it right there. So amazing.
There you go. Yeah, yeah, and it does a really good job, I think, because it works out idioms much better than you kind of expect, really. And when you translate it, you can say, translate this and give it to me in so it can be understood by a 10-year-old or something like that. So you can also change the tone on the translation as well to suit you. So there's a lot going for LLMs, I have to say.
Yeah. Dixon, we typically keep this short, so we're coming up on time, but I do want to ask you, you mentioned small brands, and before recording, we were talking about your brand name, and you were lamenting like it's hard to spell until you know what it stands for, but at least the silver lining is that it's unique. And I was saying with other SEOs, some examples of we've had leads approach us, cute VC-backed SaaS names where they're trying to be too cute. They end up with these very generic names. We've had clients, I don't want to share the exact client name, but as a comparative example, it would be like Looking or Tasting, and that's their brand name. And I'm like, wow, ranking for Tasting is going to be pretty tough. I actually think that the smaller brand with the more unique name has an advantage here. Let's say, though, that your brand name, you don't have that opportunity. You do have one of these more generic. Are they then thinking about how to make a product or feature more noticeable to LLMs?
So, I mean, if your brand name is Barber, you use the word barber in America, right? Okay, then it's a challenge. I just want to get off anything that might be it might be sensitive for you customer wise. So actually, if your brand name is Barber, in fact, Barber is a brand because we have Barber jackets here in the UK. So you have actually Barber jackets. It's spelt differently, BARBOUR. But one of the challenges with LLMs is they're going to fix your typo before you even think about it. So there's a high chance that could be a problem. How do you deal with it? I mean, if you are a barber and you're running a barber network or whatever, and you kind of list barbers and things, you've got a challenge, I think. And I don't really know what to say. I mean, if you are small, maybe it is time to think about proper branding. So when we launched Waikay, we'd actually bought AIscanner.net. So we were going to go out with AI Scanner, and so we were going to make exactly the same. What we decided was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe we made a mistake by going with a weird word that nobody can understand. But we consciously thought, you know what, AI Scanner. Yeah, fine. It might be great for SEO. When somebody types in AI Scanner, we got a good chance of showing up in AI with AIscanner.net. And maybe, what's the best AI scanner? But most people aren't going to ask for a AI scanner. Most people are going to say, optimization tool or LLM or AIO or GEO, or we haven't even made up our AIO, EIO word yet, tool or suite or, or technology or whatever. So I'm going to use all these synonyms. So we only launched in March. So we're 9 months in, I suppose. We're defined. People have heard of us. They can't remember quite who we are. But for us, this, it stands for what AI knows about you. It makes for the elevator pitch really easy. Waikay, how do you pronounce it? Well, think about it this way. It stands for what AI knows about you. At which point, I've got. If you're talking about it to somebody else, you'll have to say it stands for what AI knows about you. At which point, you've also done the elevator pitch. You haven't just given a brand over there. You've given it context. That was our way around it. If you don't have that, you've got to think about something else, and it may be time to spin off a new brand to start in this brave new world. Inlinks is our sister brand, an entity-based SEO technology. We decided to go in this different direction for two reasons. One, because the pricing model didn't work in both environments, but two, there's a lot more different than you think. I know all of my friends, all of the people that have been in the industry for 200 years, like me, are saying, it's just SEO. It's just SEO in the same way that, Scrabble and Cluedo are just games. It's Clue in America is just games. Yes, that's absolutely true, and you've got to learn rules, but the rules are different in each of those games. And if you don't play the rules, fine, you can still play the game, but you probably won't win it. I'll stop there. That sounded good.
We'll be clipping that one. Look, before we go though, Dixon, there's one question I like to ask, because you, especially in this case, you've been in the industry twice, 2.5 times as long as I have. I've been in here almost around 10 years.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, what did I not ask about that you want to share with the listener that I didn't think to ask?
Oh, God. You know what? I think that what SEOs do need is a little bit of understanding that things will go wrong on a regular basis. The problem with changing algorithms is that, if you're number one for all of your terms, or if you're kind of doing really, really well, then as soon as an algorithm changes, as soon as an LLM technology improves its technology, by definition, if you were optimized before, you're going to be unoptimized or de-optimized as soon as there's an algorithm change. So I think where people have not prepared for the emotional upset of being invested in a prompt, a search term, whatever it may be, and not engage their customer to this changing life. It's very, very difficult. You can go out and dress perfectly for the weather, but that doesn't mean to say you're going to be perfect for the weather tomorrow. The weather changes around you, and it's snowing out here now, and really those sunglasses are not really so useful anymore. So I think that the bit that we do miss in this industry is that it's very easy to suddenly get quite depressed when you've tried really, really hard, and then a multi-million-pound company changes the game rules on you.
Great.
Dealing with that, there's a lot of people haven't dealt with it very well.
It's great advice for all of life, bro. You know, a lot of us SEOs run our own businesses. We're freelancers. It can happen at the drop of a hat that your business changes on you, or indeed the whole industry changes on you. So, a great
Yeah.
advice. I want to make sure people know where to look you up. It's waikay.io. Did I get it right?
.io. Yeah. So I mean, you should, if, as long as you type in Waikay, what AI knows about you, or Waikay, the Waikay, it'll get there. Hey, look, if you can't find that, then Dixon Jones with an X.com, and you can track me down from there. And then if you really can't pronounce any of that or spell any of that, we also own inlinks.com, and have it all there, although it's a different technology, but it's the same foundational principles of knowledge graphs and entity extraction.
Dixon,
So,
what a pleasure.
DixonJones.com.
Super educational. Thank you for your time. I hope we can have you back on.
Oh, thanks very much, Greg. Yeah, it was nice talking to you, even though, your time of day is not good for being on the other side of the globe.
I'll do a midnight run next time so you can wake up later.
Thanks.